Oh, Kim, we are so thrilled to welcome you to Sydney, Australia, to deliver your latest course, Attachment Matters. Kim, as everyone knows, is an occupational therapist and a really sought after speaker across a wide variety of topics on trauma and attachment, and is naturally inspiring in her work. So thank you so much, Kim. Um, I guess we'll start with Kim. This is your latest course. Tell us why, what drove you to develop this course for not only, I guess, occupational therapists, but anyone in the relational field.
Mm. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for wanting this course to come to Sydney. I started studying attachment so long ago. In fact, I was thinking as we were going to have this interview, what year it might have been. 1996. That's a lifetime ago. And so even though this is a new centered course, this is a topic that I've been thinking about, chewing on, focusing on since 1996. And it was a life changer for me because it gave me an understanding of why people do what they do. Mm-hmm. At the time, becoming a behavioral detective, which is a relationship matters oldie but goodie course, was really centered on that question. There's always a reason for the behavior. And so attachment came into the spokes on the bicycle wheel as yet another variable that would have that influence. And so I have decided to give it a full front and center view in its own right, so that there is a deeper dive and the information continues to change. So it'll be an exciting 2025 update of all this information.
Fabulous, Kim. Kim, why 1996? Like what had you tried strategies, you'd understood, profiles and approaches, and there was still something missing, or did you hear someone speak that was really, provocative to you that you did a deep dive?
Oh, it came about as a result of a kid.
Yeah.
In my early career, I was working with kids with trauma from a sensory integrative lens. This is a part of me I know that you both know, having visited you personally in Orange, that my attempt to try to understand how the brain gets shaped by adverse experience, it really drew me into this evolving interpersonal neurobiology. So Daniel Siegel was the very first person I heard. And I remember reading The Developing Mind, 1995, 1996, in one of his first editions of the book, and going, oh my gosh, this is the missing part of so much of what I intuitively think. That there is so much going on that happens in brain development that is a result of relationship. And that because therapeutic use of self and relationship has always been my love. And so this presentation of information that was packaged in a way that we impact each other in relationship, it was like, yes, this reaffirms that which we learned as occupational therapists, but also that which we feel as humans.
Yeah. And how did your understanding of attachment, Kim, change not only your practice, but I guess your day-to-day life and relationships?
It shifted my entire perception away from judgment to curiosity. Like almost immediately. In that, and I remember the emotion that came along with the learning of, wow, all the scenes in my mind that came around in my consciousness in my, up until my early 30s, of times and relationships that I'd had where there was either blame of self or blame of other. In like a movie of a series of flashing experiences. And this way of understanding how we are all doing the best we can with what we have, and that attachment is part of human survival, and that our nervous system innately attempts to keep us in relationship with each other from our most protected state. It was it was like stepping onto a different planet. So there was forgiveness, compassion, self-understanding, an alternative perspective to diagnoses. It was massive in the way that it shook me up in thinking about how I would be with people, or
Really
be more intentional with people.
And I perhaps wonder, Kim, whether, I've had a similar experience where I was bringing myself, really intentionally, and I was bringing my knowledge of sensory integration and NDT, and, I was bringing all the things. And there was just this rub or grit, or I just wasn't able to connect with the child as I'd thought. And it was like, what am I doing wrong here? Like, and sometimes I was taking it personally. It's like, how am I misstepping when I don't normally feel like that? Like, what's happening here? So I was really trying to think about other strategies I could bring. And so that's when I landed on, and it was in your course that you delivered years ago now in Sydney, that I was like, oh, we're just mismatching. I'm bringing myself and my energy and my attempts to connect and attune that meet my nervous system and what I'm used to, and it's not landing or supporting them. And then it gave me a way to go, oh, we're just not matching because of that child's early relational experiences. So it helped me give me a roadmap forward, but it actually gave me a bit of confidence to be like, it's not that you're not attuning, Michelle, or that you're not using your therapeutic use of self as intentionally as you can. I just didn't have that suite of information to say they're in this pattern of responding due to their attachment disruptions, I guess. And so you just got to hang in there, or try a few different strategies. But yeah, it just gave another lens to be like, just keep going. You could get this gritty response for a while now, and that's okay. They're just throwing it at you. Hang in there.
Well, you will not give up something
Yeah.
until you have another way.
Yeah.
And that other way won't come unless you have repeated experiences of safety. And so we're taking a nervous system's learned way of being and offering up a new experience. And sometimes that's going to feel more unsafe than what I already do, which may not serve me, but it did at one point.
Yeah. And I kind of don't know what to do with this now because you're showing up in a different way. Like if I'm staying regulated and attuned and not giving a fight response back, it's almost like, what am I going to do with that, Michelle? Like, what are you doing? Are you unsafe? Should I keep protecting myself against you when you stay regulated? Like, what does that look like?
Kim, blending your knowledge and work in trauma, why would this course be really powerful for professionals working with children who've experienced trauma? And I guess how could attachment adaptations really show up for children who've experienced trauma and early exposure to alcohol and drugs?
One of the things that's very interesting about that question, Sarah, is that we often think about treatment for pathology, like when it shows up in a really, I don't like this word, a way that maladaptive is what I was going to say, where it interferes with my day-to-day capacity. But every single one of us
Mm.
from this lens of attachment sees the spaces where we gave up our authentic self under the need to preserve a relationship from fear.
Mm.
And
Mm.
so I'm going to broaden out your question and say this information actually applies to everyone
Mm.
who
Mm.
works with humans
Yeah.
or interacts with humans.
Yeah.
And just yesterday I had someone say to me, a parent say to me, I wish they would have taught me this in high school,
Mm. Mm.
that it might have helped me get ready for a long, marriage and parenting and workplace and all the adulting behaviors that face me,
Mm.
that I would have really benefited from
Mm.
knowing these things.
Mm.
But more specific to your answer, when those of us who work with kids who come to us with an arm's length of complexity,
Mm.
sometimes the soup, I call it,
Mm.
of differently wired brains in combination with adverse conditions and sometimes early medical trauma, and you name it, right? There's a cascade of complexities that some of our kids bring, that this allows you to be a good sifter
Mm.
of knowing, of refining your attunement, where attunement can be titrated, refined, and authentic.
Mm.
Attunement isn't actually a behavior.
Mm.
It's not a thing you do. It's an embodied state of being and putting your mind in the mind of the other that requires a tremendous amount of humility, self-understanding, presence, a tremendous amount of caloric intake. Oh my gosh, it's energy consuming, right?
Yeah.
And so when we are with children who struggle in connection to self, to other, to the environment and task, which is every kid that comes to OT, in my perspective, this information allows us to suss out what are their adaptive functions in the relational realm and what counter responses can I provide in my artful attunement, in order for them to emerge with new skills. I hope
Kim,
that made sense.
yeah. And it made me think of experiences I had the other day. I was catching up with Corey Dundon, a beautiful OT colleague of ours and yours. And she has a 3-month-old, Aylin, and she I was just watching the attunement. She's only a tiny little bubba, but um, anyway, it was really looked easy and natural, and it didn't look effortful. Like certainly Corey, is an artful, beautiful, clever therapist, but she just had a mummy hat on at the time. But there was just this ease and flow, and I couldn't help but think what a beautiful match that was. The two partners, so the mum and the 3-month-old babe, had this flow on that looked pretty easy. I know it wasn't, and it was intentional, but and then I saw a parent-child relationship later, straight after. The child has some individual differences, and the mum was trying with the same intentionality and, looked to be more effortful because I guess because there was some diversity in that child. And so mum was working a lot harder. And so I was just thinking about that, the embodiment of it, the energy that it takes. So when we've got a closer match, it looks pretty fluid and like a dance between the two that looks less effortful. When there's a bit of a mismatch for whatever reason, so people's individual differences are just not matching quite so easily, it was palpable how hard and perhaps it was leaning in the direction of the mother working really hard, where there was just this like a dance. I've heard you use that word before. And so, when you see beautiful dancing, partners, there's no one necessarily leading, it didn't look like. And so with Corey and her babe, I hope she doesn't mind us giving this example, but yeah, there was just an evenness and effortlessness to it, as opposed to some of the relationships that we see that look a bit differently. I wonder if you could comment about that individual differences, when they don't match so readily, how it becomes a bit more effortful.
First off, that's why we have a job,
Yeah.
is to become, in a sense, a translator,
Yeah.
to help a caregiver's nervous system, which is actually inherently wired to be responsive. But that goes in to the collective mix of a caregiver's history of how they were responded to. So each one of us who become parents bring with us our childhood. And so our reception of attachment is passed into the soup of our attachment. And that's half of the story. And the other half of the story is this nervous system that I'm connected to. My nervous system is wired to expect predictively certain cues that will inform me to do my best guess as to what they might be experiencing and sensing. And when there is a neural difference, it almost needs an instruction manual. And so our experience, our knowledge, our theoretical frame of references, sensory integration, understanding movement, looking at how babies are able to have these skills, we can then explain to the parent, what you're seeing is difference, not personal. Because what interrupts the sense of security isn't really the flow, but the feelings. So, parents who experience their child as difficult for whatever reason, because maybe of their own history, or because the child is neurologically dysregulated, the perception of difficult actually takes them out of sync. And so this is why in one of the things that I certified in was called the CARE Index, which is an infant caregiver dyadic evaluation of synchrony and risk. And a lot of it has to do with how they perceive each other. And this is why some caregivers who have kids with differently wired brains, they know that there's a difference, but their perception is in sync with the difference. That's called acceptance. Right? And so when you are, I'm just thinking of my friend who has a little one with Down syndrome. Not that it wasn't a struggle, but in the awareness of the struggle and also the joy, her ability to, this mom, her ability to really, really take care of herself in all of the emotions that came with the experience of having this baby that was different than she expected. there was a tremendous amount of security.
Mm.
So in a sense, there's different variables that are a setup, in a sense, for vulnerability.
Mm.
And when you have someone come along who reassures you, who interprets for you, who gives you a different way, that's where you can be so impactful.
Mm.
And that's different than perhaps just thinking about the influence of something like floor time, which is very attachment based, right? But this has got a really deep psychological
Mm.
force of impact that impacts self and the sense of well-being in the world, from a perception of my identity.
Mm. Kim, are you encouraging people, I guess, in this course in general, as therapists, to know my own attachment? Like, are you just saying, hey, before you show up for someone else, you have to dig deep, Michelle? You have to know, what your style is, what you received, what is more effortful for you to stay regulated when, you met with a particular influence. Like, will you talk about that? Because I think it just, from what you said, is so inherent, that knowledge of
Starts
self.
with us.
Yeah, it starts with us.
Well,
Mm.
the very first slide of every PowerPoint in time immemorial is it starts with you in my work. And the mission of Relationship Matters is the conscious evolution of the human spirit. So that sense of know thyself is inherent in every, doesn't matter which workshop you show up at with me, it would be filtered into that thought process. Please keep in mind, this is a 2-day workshop.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's right. Correct.
Yeah.
And so it's a sense of, and one of the things that's important, and I say it at the beginning of every time I talk about attachment and trauma, is hold on to yourself, because the information is highly personal and highly activating, and we're also trying to learn the information. So people, I know by watching their faces, that they are trying to think and feel at the same time. And simultaneously analyzing their mother-in-law and their children and their neighbor and their best friend. And right, this happens inherently. And this is a taste of a perception, of view, of an opportunity to think.
Yeah.
And
Respect.
reflect.
Yeah. Which comes up in treatment so much, Kim. That whole sense of, I think our work is highly personal, and we, in the process of treatment and working with children and families, we learn a lot about ourselves. So that chance to really understand ourselves more deeply and reflect on how we show up, and what's coming up for us is really valuable and powerful.
And part of sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. Our well-being.
When we work, and the complexity of the children that we're serving is so much more expansive all the time, especially if you are newer to our field, you can lead to such a sense of overwhelm.
Yes.
And I feel that this work helps you not feel so overwhelmed.
Absolutely. I mean, it's like self-compassion, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kim, I'm wondering about Gabor Mate. He certainly has, and I think we've touched on it, your words, and I'm going to get it wrong. Stopping the diagnosis. Stop diagnosing. What was your phrase you used?
Well, taking it beyond the diagnosis.
Yes, yes. And I feel like when I read Gabor Mate's Scattered Mind, and I've listened to multiple podcasts, like he talks about the things I've read are about ADHD, and that could be early attachment or trauma experiences can look like and present like a fight or flight response. It can look like impulsivity and hyperactivity, or that, tuning out, which can look like inattentive. Um, Initially, like I loved, I guess it just reinforces what we've been saying, that some of the profiles or diagnosis that we come across, when we see a child's soup, as you say, of conditions or diagnosis they've been given, can just look like something else. And so I guess sometimes we go, oh, okay, I can't wait to drop all of that. You're giving me an idea about some of the patterns of behavior that have been established and that can look like ADHD. Um, like, is that how you consider each person you meet now or child that you work with, that you kind of glance at the diagnosis, but you just cut to the chase and go, who really are you, and how are you relating, and how are you showing up with me and at school and at home?
I mean, the answer is yes. And I think I've always been that way, Michelle.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, Gabor Mate is a very big influence. He is a neighbor, a mentor, a colleague, a friend. He wrote the foreword to our book, Conversation with the Rattlesnake. And yeah, he had that idea that diagnosis is deceiving. One of the things that that informs every single solitary thing I think about is neurobiology. And so I'm a huge neurobiology nerd. And one of the things to say in response to your comment is that the brain parts of all these different diagnoses are similar. And, instead of the word comorbid, it's like, what am I seeing? I'm seeing this person. This person, and through the lens of function. And diagnosis, which in my opinion, is sometimes helpful to get you started.
Yeah.
Can take the view of the clinicians into here's what we're going to do. Whereas attachment theory really helped me even further open that lens into how do I meet you?
Yeah.
You, the person that's in front of me. Whatever. And we have a summer camp program called Moving to Higher Ground. It's not summer all the time in the locations that it happens, but Moving to Higher Ground is a mentorship program where clinicians work with kids and also experience personal growth. And the very first session, they are with kids. They are never given the diagnosis. And the intent is, how do you be with the child that you're with? And not see them through the eyes of assessment, with your checklist of looking at their primitive reflexes and all of the things that we do, which of course we're trained to do. But how do I see you? Yeah.
And when you pair it back like that, Kim, it comes back to that just such joy, isn't it? Like when they walk through that door and you peel away all of that, that's when you can truly connect and, and as you say, like be with them and there is just that such joy, really.
And or compassion set. When it feels a bit grittier, where it's not, where they kind of don't meet you in a way that you might expect or hope, or it feels really embodiedly joyful for you. When it, then I tip into compassion and think, wow, how can I help you? Because it can be harder to see them for who they are if they're grittier and their behaviors are a bit grittier and externalizing, and they look, they're appearing like they don't really care and they don't want to be there. It's like,
You're talking about my favorite kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too, because it's hard for the average person to find joy in them. It's like, how do we get through this? I think as humans, you know, I love an ease and flow and a giggle and a laugh and meeting my
Mm,
own kind of match is so joyful. Um, yeah, so it's no doubt humans, or we all want to feel that ease and flow, but I
mm,
really feel quite compassionate for kids who can't show up in an expected way and have the average
mm,
educator, shop assistant, whoever, average person in their life kind of get them, because often they'd be met with whatever they're putting out.
mm,
The thing that you're reminding me of here, Michelle, is attachment thinking
Yeah.
takes you away from compliance-based
Yeah.
mm,
engagement, where, everybody has to do what
mm,
they need to do in order to be in this environment.
Mm.
And this gives a sense of how to be with people, even in groups,
mm,
that everybody's attachment needs are so unique,
mm,
that one child may need like a sprinkle of connection, and that they'll hang in there with that little sprinkle for like 45 minutes and not need you again. And then you may
mm.
have, another kid who's sitting there right beside you who actually needs to be right beside you
Yeah.
because their attachment system is activated
Mm,
in the potential of lack of predictability, or lack of closeness, or lack of a sense of security. And
mm,
that is usually misunderstood as manipulation,
mm,
control, that this kid is bad, they need to be reinforced. This
mm.
is such a different way of seeing
Yeah.
Or that equity one, I hear that a bit. Like they take so much time, it's not fair for the other
yeah,
kids.
yeah.
Uh, yeah.
So, well,
Mm,
I'm really hoping that there is this invitation of our dialogue lights people up
mm,
to want to both see themselves through the eyes of that they already do some of the things that we're talking about,
Mm.
as a way of empowerment and validation and inspiration, and then
mm,
also some new learning that will help others fine tune. That goes on
mm,
forever, by the way. Fine
mm,
tune and continue to expand your
mm,
capacity both to take care of yourself and
Yeah.
mm,
those that you serve.
So
mm,
will it be a bit of a blend, Kim? So we'll obviously, because of who you are and your deep diving and your love of the theory and your long, time with attachment theory, but also all the other theories and the body, the human evolution of the human body, as you say. Um, so no doubt there's some theory, but are there some practical components as well that we might kind of,
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely. And that will probably come mostly in the form of group discussion,
mm,
looking at some clinical cases. But I think the other thing to say about, and those of you who know me, I feel silly telling you this, but for those of you who don't, I'm such a storyteller.
Yeah.
So in the
mm.
stories of examples,
Mm.
you will feel this work in action,
Yeah.
which helps, but also an opportunity for you to take some of the information and, in the context of the course, do some analysis and problem solving, and how that relates to the clinic when you go back the next day.
Mm, mm,
So
mm.
excited, Kim, to host you, and yeah, we cannot wait for the course.
I
Mm.
can't wait. I'm counting the days.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
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 So I guess, Kim, if you're a human and you're interested in supporting other humans, this course is for you. It's not OT specific, it's not educator specific. No doubt we'll dive into some of the neurobiology and there'll be science, but is it for everyone?
You know, that's a very important question that you just asked. One of the things that I think I love to do and do well is bring science into everyday speak. So even though Attachment Matters has never been hosted before, this topic was actually the topic of the book that I wrote with Theron Fleury, who is a former NHL hockey player. And we talked to thousands of people about attachment, like everyday common people in forums and in factories, in policing, in firefighting, in corporate. Thousands and thousands of people felt this information. So yes, the way that this curriculum is developed, you could enter into it at any level and find something that would bring you some awareness, for sure.
Well, I have seen you present at big workshops in Sydney and online and we were lucky enough that you came to Orange and co-treated with us in the clinic, and look, and these conversations with you, Kim, you always show up with your whole heart and your energy and your inspiration. I don't know how you get the energy to do it, but look, I have loved, usually waiting on every word that you're saying and, just feel the power and the wisdom of what you have to say. So I just can't wait for another 2-day immersion with Kim Barthel.
Oh, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you, both of you, and all of you who come to join us.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you.